If you're a family with a high school catcher that wants to play college baseball, you already know that this process is not going to be cheap. It's not going to come from cheap effort on his end, and it's definitely not going to be cheap financially for you guys. A lot of the families that I talk to are spending anywhere from $4,000 to well over $15,000 a year trying to make this college baseball thing actually happen. The elite travel teams can run you anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 a year. The showcases can be $400 and up. And then you add in travel, hotels, time off of work, private lessons, and pretty quickly $4,000 to $8,000 a year sounds about right. But for most parents, it was never about the money. Most parents are happy to and want to provide their athlete with opportunities. But what you never want as a parent is to question two things. Number one, how bad does he actually want it? And number two, is he actually doing the right things? So here's what I want to give you in this video. The exact evaluation process that we use here at Pro Point Catching inside of our College Ready Catcher program. This is the same framework that we use to objectively identify where a catcher is right now, get them to clearly define the level of competition that they're aiming for, identify the gaps between who they are now and the level they want to go to, essentially what's holding them back. And from there, we build a roadmap that gives development guidance as well as recruiting guidance specific to each catcher and not general advice. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to apply this framework to your own catcher so that you can start to understand what matters and when. And for quick context, my name is Nick Zoris. I caught at the Division I level. And for the last few years, I've worked remotely with catchers across the entire countries as well as with their families. Over 50 of our athletes have gone on to play college baseball, with plenty more in the pipeline that will. I've seen families spend a fortune chasing exposure without clarity. And I've also seen families that slow down, understand a process, and see things start to happen when they should. The difference isn't the amount of effort that's being put in, but it's the clarity around the process. The first step in taking a high school catcher from where they are now to college ready is a truly objective evaluation of where they currently stand. So we evaluate everything from the executive functioning like goal setting, planning, prioritizing, to the catcher specific skills like receiving, blocking, and throwing. The goal here is to remove any emotion or guesswork in the evaluation and get an objective understanding of who you are as a player at this moment in time. The more honest that we can be in this evaluation, the clearer that it's going to become as to what is holding that athlete back from the levels that they're striving for. And this is super critical before we ever start building out his plan. So we're going to look at things like sleep and recovery, diet and body composition, grades and academic realities, the athlete's lifestyle and daily habits, receiving, blocking, and throwing mechanics. And then we have our metrics like pop time, arm strength, 60-yard dash. And we also look at overall physicality of the athlete, as well as their overall recruiting efforts so far. And we don't want to forget hitting. Inside of College Ready Catcher, we have our athletes grade themselves on a scale of 1 to 100, with 100 being a high caliber Division I catcher. And we make our athletes go through this process not to tear them down, but to get them to clearly identify the gap between who they are right now and the catcher that they want to become. Because you're not going to be able to properly fix something that you don't fully understand. Once we can get a catcher to objectively understand where they are right now, step number 2 is going to be getting them to set goals that are an actual reality for their situation. A dream school for catcher A should not automatically be a dream school for catcher B. The key is going to be clearly identifying for yourself the college experience that your catcher wants, the baseball experience that your catcher wants, the trade-offs that you guys are willing to make as a family, and essentially why all of his choices actually matter to him. Sometimes we see athletes that want to compete at the highest levels of Division I, and that is totally great. But we make sure that they understand what that level actually requires and what the athletes that are getting recruited to programs like that actually look like. Some guys are high academic guys and they want to use baseball to get an elite level education and be a part of a solid baseball team and are okay with going the Division III route. Any outcome that you define is good as long as you're defining your outcomes intentionally and you're putting the thought into picking these schools that you want to play for. The key word here is intentional. When I look at your list of target schools, it shouldn't be all Power 5 schools unless you're actually on track to be that guy. We always want to prioritize clarity instead of just blind ambition. Once we can understand where a catcher objectively stands right now, and we've clearly identified his goals or his target schools, we reach the most uncomfortable step in this entire process. This is going to be the recruiting reality check for your catcher. We really let the athletes answer this question for themselves, and we want them to ask some kind of question like, if you were recruiting yourself to the school that you want to play for, would you actually be interested? Would you actually recruit yourself? And I mean like right now, not after one more summer of development or after you get your pop time to a certain metric. If the athlete and us as coaches can confidently answer yes, we move into a targeted recruiting phase. This is going to include recruiting video, targeted outreach, exposure, as well as continued skill development. And we're going to do it in the order that makes sense to each athlete. But if the athlete or us as coaches answer no to the question, we don't panic. We simply figure out what it's going to take to make the answer to that question a yes. We get clear on the why, and then we move into step 4, which is essentially closing the gap between where that catcher is now and where he wants to go. Whether a catcher is on track or not in relation to their goals, there will always be a gap between where he is now and a catcher that can actually start at that next level. But before that starting role is actually secured, the catchers that are getting recruited are simply the ones that are deemed to be on track to compete at that level by the recruiters that are making that evaluation. So even once you're considered to be on track, development doesn't stop. If anything, it speeds up. So we back engineer this process. We look at what this catcher is going to look like when he's a starter at his goal school. And then we're asking ourselves questions like, what does this level actually require? What do the catchers at this level actually look like physically? What metrics are going to matter to the coaches that are recruiting for these schools? How do we get in touch with and in front of these coaches? What habits are going to be non-negotiable? And what does the typical week look like for a starting catcher at that level? From there, we reverse engineer it. We get an understanding of what needs to happen this year to make that goal a reality, and then we break that down into seasons. We understand what needs to happen this upcoming season, and then we're going to break that down into months. Once we understand what needs to happen in the next month, we can break that down into weeks. And of course, if we understand what's going to happen over the next week, we can break that up into daily execution plans for our athletes. We remove any of the guesswork, and all that's left to do for the athlete is simply to execute the plan and get the work done. Once we understand where a catcher stands currently, we've identified clear goals with him. We've identified the gap between these two and then built a plan down to the day. This is where the execution piece really starts to matter, and this is where I see a lot of families get it wrong. They try to fix everything at once. They see the amount of work that needs to be done and they start to think, oh crap, we're behind. We need to start doing everything. And that is exactly how athletes get overwhelmed. It's how you guys as parents get frustrated. And that's when we see progress starting to stall out. At Pro Point Catching, we don't do it that way. We rank the constraints that are holding your catcher back from most important to least important. The single biggest constraint at that time becomes the primary focus for our catchers. We attack that constraint aggressively. We track it very closely to make sure we're progressing properly. And then we build real consistency around that piece. But here's the key. Once that constraint that we were working on is no longer the biggest constraint, we don't just stop working on it entirely. We're going to then move that constraint into management mode. So they're going to continue to attack this constraint, but just enough to hold gains and see a slower rate of progress. And then as a catcher proves that he can manage one constraint and we add new constraints, that's when we see athletes are a few months into the program and execution and responsibility is really starting to increase. And he's not considered college ready maybe yet, but his capacity has grown. He's now managing weeks and working on multiple different things with a clear plan of what he's actually doing and why he's doing the work that he's doing. That's how we see progress compound over time, and that's how we see our catchers' development start to accelerate. That's when recruiting really starts to make sense. Everything that you just heard is the exact framework that we use inside of College Ready Catcher to take high school catchers from where they are now to not only securing college commitments, but actually earning starting roles and impacting programs at the next level. Some families are going to take the information from this video and apply it on their own, and that's already going to put them ahead of most of their competition. But if you're a family with a high school catcher and you guys want to work with me through this exact process, the next step is going to be a college catcher evaluation call. There's going to be a QR code on your screen, and there's also going to be a link to our page in the description of this video for you to check out. On that call, we're going to walk through that exact process that we went through in this video, but we're going to customize it to your catcher. We'll tell you how we help in this process. If it ends up being a great fit, we can let you know how to get started with us. And if not, you'll still walk away from that call with a bunch of value and clarity for your unique situation.